Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. If you don't know who Danny Thompson is, he's a very famous tech influencer. He has a really cool story. He basically went from like frying chicken in a gas station to becoming a software developer, and now he's a director of engineering. Amazing story. I really love following him. He has practical advice, and recently he asked a really, really good question that I actually wrote about in my newsletter. And if you're not on that newsletter subscription list, I think you should be. I write a lot. Sometimes I write more than what would make sense to write on LinkedIn, or things that I think are too much of a hot take, things that I basically just don't want to post on LinkedIn for a number of reasons. I love to write. I think it's the best way to digest information. And I wrote about this there. But I want to go into a little bit more depth about this question that Danny Thompson asked that got a lot of responses across multiple social media platforms. He asked this. He said, software developers with experience in tech, if you had to hit the job market today and get a job, what would be the tech stack you would use and why? And I saw a lot of answers to this, and some of them were really well-intentioned, but I'm like, if somebody follows this advice, they're not going to get hired. I read some stuff that went along this line. Don't worry about the technology. Just focus on core principles of programming, computer science fundamentals, and like the underlying technology. Don't worry about the frameworks or learning React or JavaScript. Just learn the basics of computer science and databases. And I'm like, that works for a really, really small subset of companies out there. Big tech companies will hire for your general programming skills. I've interviewed at Facebook, I've interviewed at Google, I've interviewed at Coinbase, I've interviewed at a few of the big tech giants out there. And for the most part, they don't ask you like, hey, what language do you want to use? They'll give you like a white piece of paper, a whiteboard. You're literally writing on a document sometimes, and you're not really focusing on the language that you're using. You're focusing on solving a problem using data structures and algorithms. The reason why they do these kinds of exams is because they're massive. And you're not going to be writing the kind of code you would write at Google that you're going to write for a startup or a mid-sized company that is not a tech company. They want to make sure you understand the basics and beyond the basics, honestly, so that you can hit the ground running with their tech stack. They're like, we don't care what language you may have learned in the past. You're going to use what we use. And so it's much more important to us that you have this general understanding of programming and how to use data structures and algorithms, rather than if you're really good at JavaScript or if you're really good at Java or something like that. That is not the case at the other 99% of companies out there. So I looked at the people that were giving this advice, and I noticed that for the most part, they worked in really big tech organizations. And I'm like, yeah, for those organizations, that makes a ton of sense. For everybody else, for you out there listening to that, don't follow that advice. I want to be very clear. That will not get you hired. So in order to get hired, you can look at the extremes, right? When I want to know if something makes sense, if I'm trying to see if my logic will make sense or if it applies correctly, I think in extremes. So let's think of this extreme. What is the most extreme tech stack you could learn that would make you super unhireable? And so if tech stack really doesn't matter, right? If that's your argument, that tech stack matters not at all, then go learn Fortran, COBOL, F#, and some other obscure programming language, and then see if you can get hired. And I can pretty much guarantee you that you will not get hired. You're going to go into a job, they're going to say, cool, let's build a React component. You're like, I don't know React. What do you know? COBOL, Fortran. What? But it's 2024, 2025. Why do you know those things? Well, because technology doesn't matter. And they're going to say, well, it kind of does here because you're a junior developer and we're taking a chance on you. And we have a team that builds stuff with React or JavaScript or Java or Python. And you don't know any of those things. No, like I said, I know COBOL and Fortran. Take it or leave it. They say, well, we're gonna pass on you this time, but good luck out there. You're not going to have too much luck out there on the job market. If technology stack truly didn't matter, you could learn one of those languages I just talked about. You can look them up. They were popular in the 70s and 80s, but not anymore, right? So you're not going to get hired with those. So what will make you actually hireable? I think a lot about the advice I would tell my sons or my daughter, because that makes sure that I'm giving you the kind of advice that I would give to them. So I know it's not like based on my own interests and things, because I am a biased person, right? Anybody you listen to is somewhat biased, and I am no different, right? Like I have a company, Parsity. I also work as a software developer at a startup. I've used a lot of these technologies that I'm going to advise you to use, and we teach a lot of them at Parsity, but that's not the only reason I'm telling you to do them. The reason I use them at work and the reason I teach them through Parsity is the same, because I truly believe they're going to make you more hireable. Why else would I want people to learn them? And I would tell my sons or my daughter the exact same thing. So let's get into it. Let's get into the tech stack that I think is going to make you the most hireable, specifically going into 2025. Yo, by the way, I should also let you know there are less than 10 spots available for Parsity. Work in a super small cohort with a team of software engineers, including me, to learn to build complex software as a full stack developer and get hired in 2025 and change careers the right way. If you want to work with me one-on-one to get ready to pass the admissions challenge and crush it, schedule a call using the link below in the show notes. And now, back to the episode. So let's start off with the easy stuff. React or Vue or Angular. When it comes to front-end web development frameworks, when it comes to JavaScript frameworks, this is the easiest decision you will ever make in your software developer career. Learn React.js. Simple. There's no escaping it. It dominates the front-end landscape by far. Angular and Vue aren't even really close in popularity. So React.js just continues to take up market share. Now, Vue and Angular, I'm not saying those are bad choices or that they're good choices or that React is a bad or a good choice. Honestly, when I learned React, I didn't like it. I thought it was stupid. I'm like, why the hell is everybody learning this stuff? And I'm super glad I learned it because it made me way more hireable. I was an AngularJS developer when I first started out. And then I wanted to learn Ember. Ember has since kind of died out. Angular is still really popular. Vue has become more popular and seems to be exploding in popularity, but React by far and away takes over. It's just like become synonymous with front end. Is that a good thing? Bad thing? It is a thing. Whether you like it or not, you should learn it. And if you're learning React.js, learn Next.js as well. Next.js is the official framework that React recommends you learn. That means that you write React within a Next.js app. Next.js is a full stack framework, meaning it has back-end and front-end capabilities. So you can do things on the server with Next.js. You can write your React code, which a user will interact with Next.js. So it's the best of both worlds. And because full stack developers are now more common than front-end or back-end developers, you better dang well be full stack in the future. This is a huge departure from the past. The old advice used to be just specialize in one thing, specialize in front end or specialize in back end. That is outdated at this point. And it really happened fast because a few years ago, that was actually solid advice. Nowadays, that is not solid advice and that will not help you get hired. Front end developers are not dying, but they are quickly being replaced by people that can do everything. And by everything, I mean they can go all the places they need to go. Being a full stack developer doesn't mean you're like equally good at back end as you are equally good at front end. It just means that if there's a back end thing that needs to be done, you can go there. You can go there and know enough to work your way out of it or to add some value at that point. Everybody's going to have a specialty. So you can be a mostly front end full stack developer, or you can be a mostly back end full stack developer. I work on a team of 3 right now at a very small startup. We are all full stack developers. The head of engineering is much more back end focused. I tend to be more front end focused, as does my other coworker. Now, the reason I joined the startup was specifically to get more back end focused, and I'm getting some experience with that. And guess what we're using? Next.js. It's really fun to use in many ways, but it is not easy. And also, as React keeps coming out with more. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode, and if you're interested in becoming a software developer, learning how to build complex software, and actually get hired, join me at Parsity.io. If you're serious about joining, just schedule a call with me by clicking the link in the show notes below. Updates, and when they release version 20, I believe next year, I guarantee you, or at least I'm betting, that there's going to be a shortage of Next.js developers because a lot of recruiters don't even know what this is yet. I think the wave is coming where there's going to be a lot of places like we need Next.js developers because Next.js is not easy, honestly. I've been struggling to learn it in a very deep way and write production code with Next.js. It is tough. So if you learn it and you learn enough of it, you could be early to the party and get a lot of benefit from learning that. And that's one of the many reasons why we're teaching it at Parsity right now. So next, let's dive into some of the programming languages outside of JavaScript that you should learn. JavaScript is a must-have. It is the most popular programming language in the world. So to me, it's just table stakes that you know JavaScript. If you don't know JavaScript, I think you're incredibly limiting your job opportunities. It's just used everywhere. It's used on the front end. It's used on the back end. It's used in React.js. It's used everywhere. So why not learn it? But then you hear this online. Well, JavaScript's not a real programming language, not like Java or C# or Rust or whatever people are saying. I'm super over that whole dumb conversation. It is pointless. It's useless. It's not even a debate that's worth having anymore. Whatever language you write programs in is a real programming language. It's just stupid to say that, or at least it's just pointless and just leads to dumb debates. Anyway, learn JavaScript, but don't stop. I think learning TypeScript is a great next step, and I was way too late to learn this. I'm finally learning this in a deeper way, and I got to tell you, it has made my life as a developer easier. It's made learning things like Rust a little bit easier, and it reminds me of when I used to write C# in some ways, because the author of C# is also the author of TypeScript. Little JavaScript trivia there for you. So if you want to get deeper into a language that is a little bit different than JavaScript and is more like C# or other typed languages, meaning that the types are enforced. For example, you can't add a string with a number. Weird stuff that you can do in JavaScript that you couldn't do in C# or Java. Typed languages. Well, TypeScript is a really good next step. Now, here's the one that I think you should really be learning. Python. Python has exploded in popularity, and it rises as AI continues to rise. So when you look at the trajectory of AI and machine learning, you also see that Python will grow at the same pace. That is because Python has become the default language of AI and machine learning. Now, I know you hear about how there's way too many developers and not enough jobs and no one can get hired, but here's the thing. There's actually a shortage of AI developers right now. Most companies, the big ones at least, put a lot of money in AI, and they are finding it's really hard to hire people for it. Really, really difficult. Now, AI doesn't always mean that you are the developer creating these really complex models or doing the research. It can also mean the people that are doing the data engineering, which is one of the many reasons why I'm adding a Python and data engineering curriculum to Parsity. Check it out. You can go to parsity.io/PY30 to take advantage of a discount. When I released that, I actually hired a Python and data engineering expert to write that curriculum. And we're going to give a teaser of it in a 30-day program that'll get you at least started with it and probably actually take you beyond that. So I think it'll be really fun. I cannot wait for this. Before I got into software engineering and kind of went all the way in, I was considering switching over to data science, and sometimes I think I messed up by not doing that. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? Dang, if I had done that like 8 years ago, I'd be so far ahead of everybody else at this point. I'd be at the center of this wave happening now. That's the funny thing about the future, right? You never know what's going to blow up. I thought data engineering was really cool, and like creating these statistical models to understand people's buying habits or understand how companies could do forecasts for the future was really cool. By the way, this is 7-8 years ago. This is way before people were talking about, large language models. This was called business intelligence or data analyst. Now it's become a much more dressed up, fancy term, and it's super sexy, but data engineering is not some new thing at all, but it is having a moment right now, and it is exploding. So I'm betting that that's going to create a demand for data engineers in 2025 and beyond. So if I was going to learn anything outside of JavaScript and TypeScript, it would certainly be Python. Now, as we're talking about more back-end focused languages, that leads us to databases. So what should you be learning as far as the database layer? SQL or NoSQL? And when it comes to SQL versus NoSQL, you have a couple choices. You have SQL, you have Postgres, and then you have MongoDB. Learning SQL will allow you to go from Oracle SQL to Postgres to all the different flavors of SQL and kind of understand how to construct some basic queries. This is not super difficult. There's a really good site called sequelzoo.net. I also have an episode you can check out, which I'll have in the show notes, that goes through how you can learn some SQL on your own in a hands-on way using ChatGPT and NeonDB to create a database and do some stuff. I think it's a really cool exercise to do. I did this personally because now I am learning SQL on the job. Before that, though, I exclusively used MongoDB. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's where all the startups are, and startups are known for opting for MongoDB. They often want to use MongoDB because it's considered faster, because you don't have these schema changes, and changing your database layer with SQL is often more difficult. It requires a lot more thought and planning. With MongoDB, it's like you're basically working with big objects in the cloud, and it's not super hard to update these objects, change them, make them in whatever shape you want to make them. So learning MongoDB would be a really good choice if you're near a startup capital like me, if you're in San Francisco, or maybe Los Angeles, or Seattle, or Austin, or New York, places where startups tend to be more dense. But if you're like in the Midwest or Philadelphia or something like that, or DC, then maybe learn SQL because it's probably going to be what they want you to know on the job. This is one of those things I think is a little bit more local specific than just saying, just learn this or just learn this. I think learning both is not super difficult, honestly. You can learn enough MongoDB and enough SQL to be dangerous in either one, and you can take that and then be much more hireable than just knowing one or the other. Now for the cloud. As more companies don't want to have servers on the premises, meaning they don't want to have literal black boxes that are servers sitting in an office somewhere in a back room. This used to be the standard, and at some point in the last, 10 years, maybe less, people moved to the cloud. We thought, great, this will save us all sorts of infrastructure costs. We don't have to manage these physical servers on premises. If we have a spike in traffic, our servers literally won't overheat and we'll have to get a new one or something like that. Or if a flood happens, they won't destroy our servers. These are real things to think about. I mean, when you have physical boxes on premises, something like a flood or a power outage could screw you over. That's why people moved to the cloud. They said, cool, Jeff Bezos, Amazon, you take care of my servers and you will be the ones that manage all that infrastructure for me. That's come with a lot of associated costs because it's not free, obviously, to do that. And they can charge you incredible bills if you're not careful. But learning these things is super important nowadays as a full stack developer. We already went over why you want to be full stack. And part of being full stack is knowing a little bit about cloud providers. And there's a few out there: AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Provider. These are the top choices. I would just learn some AWS because it is by far and away the most popular choice. I learned some years ago, and it's been really, really helpful. It helps me speak with people outside of like full stack and front end and back end teams. I can speak with the DevOps team. I can speak with the architects, and I'm not some AWS expert at all. I didn't get AWS certified, and I never, ever will. And if you're a software developer, I wouldn't do it either because no one cares. No one's going to care about your certification. I'm a Google Cloud Provider certified, whatever. I'm an AWS certified. You get these really easy certificates that like everybody has. And if they're hiring you to write code, they're almost certainly not hiring you to manage their cloud infrastructure. So don't get the certificate unless you're in DevOps. Then you can ignore what I just said and you should absolutely get the certificate. If you're a full stack web developer or a junior developer, I just don't think that getting that certificate is going to make any difference at all. I do think knowing some AWS or Google Cloud Provider or Azure is going to be incredibly helpful for you as a developer, though, if you're on the job market, because now you can work on things like Lambdas. You can work on things like S3. You can get your hands dirty with some of the infrastructure that they think is okay for you to touch. Like if there's a problem with a code pipeline and the code's not deploying correctly, you can probably go investigate that. If you need to write a Lambda to do some sort of transformation on an image or something like that, you can probably figure out how to do that. When people use words like CloudFront, EC2, S3, IAM, at least you kind of know what they're talking about. So you don't need to be an expert to know these things. It can just really help out because when you speak the same language as the person interviewing you, that is going to create trust, and it's going to make them look at you like, oh, this person knows more than your average like boot camp grad or average CS grad that may just know a little bit of like front end web dev. Now this person is somebody I can speak to intelligently about these other things, and you don't need to go deep into these things. So a really nice challenge might be, create an AWS free tier account, create a Lambda that transforms an image and loads it into an S3 bucket. Those are a bunch of buzzwords. I get it. Just look up what I just said and reverse engineer how to do that. And really simple one would be hosting a simple website with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript using S3. And then to make it a little bit more difficult, see if you can use CloudFront for distribution. Again, I don't expect that you even know what I'm talking about here. That's okay. Look these things up and try to reverse engineer how to build them. Just look it up, and then you can find all sorts of tutorials how to do it. By the way, at Parsity, I'm doing exactly this. This is the stuff that's going to be included at the beginning of next year, and that I've actually allowed students to get some early access to as I'm building it. I think it's really cool. I think it's fun stuff to learn. It kind of demystifies the cloud and allows you to see some really practical use cases for using some of these weird services like S3, IAM, EC2, CloudFront. What the hell do these things mean? This is what happens when nerds make up the names for stuff. They make up these like weird names. You're like, wait, what the hell is this? Why don't they just call it like image hosting or something like that? Or identity management. But instead they come up with these funny names. Anyway, learn some AWS, do those things I just said, and it's going to make you more knowledgeable than I'd say 90% of the people out there that went to a boot camp and got that random certificate. I should mention lastly that technology choice is important. We've gone over that, right? But if learning the right tech stack was the key to employment, if that was like the shortcut to getting employed, if it was just a simple formula, like learn X, Y, and Z, and you'll be really employable, then we wouldn't have all these people out here that have learned these things and still can't get hired. So what is the disconnect here? The disconnect is that you need a combination of the experience, the relevant technology skills, and an online presence that creates trust. So when a recruiter looks at you, they see, 1, the relevant technology, 2, the fact that maybe you have some work experience that is also relevant to the job, and 3, you look trustworthy. Now, some of these things are simpler than the others. Having an image of your face, right, could make you look more trustworthy. That's super simple, but you'd be shocked how many people don't even have that. Having experience is much harder. I've gone over this in a couple episodes, but getting experience when you don't have any is difficult, even if you want to work for free. So what I might do, and I actually spoke to a guy on the phone about this a few days ago. He was calling me up and said he went to this boot camp, doesn't really have any experience, doesn't really know what to do next, trying to find some work for free that he can do, doesn't even have many friends that need his kind of services. Well, I would go old school. I would look at the brick and mortar businesses in your area. A student at Parsity did this. A guy I had on the show actually, Nils. You can listen to that episode and find out how he did the exact same thing. But what he did basically was look at some businesses in his local area. I think he found a barbecue shop and said, hey, do you need like an order management system or something? They had a need, and he says, I can do that for you for free. He basically got a recommendation from them. I don't think he was ever actually paid for this, but incredible experience that he was able to use on his resume and helped him get hired. Similarly, another student decided to make her own basically business where she does freelance websites specifically for like massage therapists. She picked a niche and she found people within that niche that needed her service and started building them sites. Now, when you go out to ask people, hey, do you need a website? That's probably the wrong question. Hey, do you want more customers? Hey, I noticed your website is outdated. Do you think having a new one could help increase your credibility online? If so, I'd be happy to do that for you. And the only thing I want in return is a recommendation from you and maybe an introduction to one more business that you think could benefit from me working with them. This time, maybe not for free, right? That's a hard thing to turn down, right? You see a janky website and you say, hey, I got an idea. How would you like me to make that better for free? And the only thing I want is a recommendation. If it's good, then give me a recommendation. If it's not good, hey, you walk away with a free website. Pretty good deal, right? This will help you get that experience that you need using the technology that you've talked about on your resume. So for example, when you say, I'm going to build you this website, don't ask them what technology they want you to build it in. That's not ready for them to decide. you should look at their website and think, okay, I'm going to use a few of the key technologies that I know, maybe React. Maybe I'll deploy this using AWS. Maybe I'll buy a domain or have them buy a domain through Route 53 on AWS, and I'll host it there for them. And I'll explain to them the cost of doing this. Or maybe I'll host it here or there. You can pick and choose the technologies that are going to make a good story for you within reason. You don't want to just do what makes you look good. You want to help out the customer, obviously, too. But there's no reason you can't use these core technologies. They're so popular that it'd be hard for me to imagine why you wouldn't want to use some of these core technologies to build a website or a service or an app for somebody out there. Now you have the experience, you have the recommendation, and you have the popular technologies that we just went over. So that is kind of how you bundle all this up and not just get the relevant tech, but get the relevant experience using it to do that. This is not easy, by the way. If this was easy, everybody would just be doing it, right? It's not easy to find work. It's awkward to ask people for a favor if you're not used to doing it. And it's scary because once you're on the hook for somebody's actual business, it can be a lot of pressure. And to do that is no small task. So before you go out just bothering people and saying, hey, I'll build you something, make sure that you're really ready for that commitment. As a business owner, I understand just how important websites are and how important it is to attract customers. It's the reason why I paid somebody, or I paid multiple people, to build the new Parsity website. By the way, check it out, parsity.io. I had some web developers and a designer and a marketer help me out with that website because I know how important it is to have a website that conveys your message, your ideas, and looks good. I'm not a designer. I'll never be a designer. I don't know how to make good looking websites, but I've been making websites for about 10 years now. I hope this episode was helpful. And if you see that post by Danny Thompson, check it out. Read some of those things under there. Maybe you'll agree with me. Maybe you'll agree with some of the other people that had way different opinions than me. This is just my opinion, by the way. And it's the stuff that I would recommend to anybody that I like. And I think I like you. Anyway, if you're interested in becoming a software developer in 2025, I would join Parsity quickly because we have less than 10 spots available for the first cohort of 2025. I'll also be working with people one-on-one to prepare them. So join now, take advantage of that discount, and hopefully I'll see you in the next cohort. See you around. That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. If you're serious about switching careers and becoming a software developer and building complex software and want to work directly with me and my team, go to parsity.io. And if you want more information, feel free to schedule a chat by just clicking the link in the show notes. See you next week.